Welcome, and thanks for joining us on today's episode of Discussions with Derek and Susan. You can catch us on all major listening platforms, and you can watch Derek and Susan live in the studio on YouTube. Now let's hand it over to Derek and Susan.
Hi, welcome everyone. Once again, welcome to Discussion with Derek and Susan podcast. Please do subscribe, like, and share so that many people can hear what we are talking about. And I hope that we have blessed, impacted, or impart to you some wisdom and understanding. Today, we're talking about children and our battle for influence, a big topic, Derek.
Yeah, I think it's something that's so concerning to every parent because there is the battle of influence. We talked about a little bit about this, and we were as we started out about social medias that's out there and all the latest thing. We've got TikTok and Instagram, and all the things on. I don't think they're really on Facebook nowadays, our kids, but these influence that are there and pop culture. That is there. And so there's so many voices that are out there. I remember we were talking to one parent and, their daughter was getting exposed to, a lot of things about alternate, lifestyles and things like that. And really indoctrinated with a lot of wrong information. And, they were having a conversation with their kid. And thankfully, as a good parent, they did and asked, who told you that? Where did you hear that? And they're like, oh, well, I read it online. And so, they went and began to break it down and realized that, it was not based on science. It wasn't based on facts. It was just something that's out there on the internet. And, write that down if you're taking notes. Don't believe everything you read on the internet. There's a lot of nonsense that's out there. Yeah. Anybody can set up a web page or a blog and go out and put something out there, but it's not based on facts. It's not based on science. It's not based on what's been the norm, throughout history. It's not based on the Bible. And so the problem with kids is in the early years, of course, they're in that vulnerable place where the first voice is the thing that they listen to. So if they hear, for example, wrong information about something, even as parents, as we come in, if we're the second voice or worse, the third voice, the fourth voice, they're going to filter everything according to the first voice that they heard. And you have to begin to try to influence them to not believe what they've initially received. And so what's the goal for us as parents? We need to be the first voice in our children's lives. And so I remember one time, and you probably remember the story, we were having a barbecue one time at our house and we were here, and it was years ago, and our kids were probably 5, 6, and they had questions because they had gone and watched, a cooking show with you. And in the middle of the cooking show, which they loved cooking, and that was something they did with you, one of the guys is there and he said, oh, I love to cook for my husband. And remember that? And they're freaking out and they're like, Mom, what do you mean he's a man? He cooks for his husband. And that was the issue that came out. And, I was a little provoked. Because I'm like, why do I need to have this conversation? Of course, this is something that's part of our world and we deal with it. But like, this is a 5-year-old who's trying to watch family, television. And now I've got to have a conversation that is probably beyond their maturity. And, I went back and I was, kind of prayed and I was asking like, how to address this. And I think we kind of pushed it off at that time. But one thing the Lord spoke to me is just answer whatever questions they have on that level. Don't say more, don't need to bring them and, bring it deeper into the thing, but just answer the questions they had in the simplistic of what they have and speak into that. And that's what we did. And of course there were further questions along the road, as we go out, but that kind of enabled us to take that moment to influence them and be a first voice as they were exposed to something and create an environment where they felt comfortable asking us those questions.
So good. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's definitely important for parents to address some of this social value system and that is going on there and give our perspective on it. I remember also when they were young, they came back one day from school, remember, and they were like, there was such a look of fear on their faces when they asked us about divorce, because they were in a Christian school, but yet their friends, they had divorce, family that separated, divorced, and they have half brothers, stepsisters, and all that. So they were very confused coming from, Asia, where divorce is still very much a stigma, and people don't talk about it, and people stay in their marriage and they don't get a divorce because it's just not so well accepted, and so nobody talked about it. But when they came here, it's like it's prevalent.
Yeah.
So I remember that day when they came and talked to us, and there was fear on their face, and then we had to tell them about why people divorce and what is God's perspective on marriage, on divorce, and so it's important for us not to shun away from all these difficult questions, but to be able to answer at an age appropriate level. Right, age appropriateness is important to address that and to always bring it back to God's principle and God's way, right? And give them a platform where they can anchor themselves so that they will not be tossed and turned by the doctrines of the world.
Yeah, and again, it's being that first voice, and I mean, not, for them, they were shocked, but it's not that we're against divorcees. I mean, I come from a divorced family. There's many people that have been exposed to that, but our kids were not. I mean, we didn't talk that way. We didn't think that way. The culture we came from, it wasn't so prevalent. So now they're exposed to that. So how do we come back? Again, it's answering those questions on that level they're at, but also giving a perspective of, things happen and even with alternate lifestyles or whatever, and so they can also have the right perspective of we walk in love, we don't judge people, all of that. But again, when we talk about influence, what is it? It's really giving them the standard of God's word, God's plan, bringing it back. It's not just our opinion or our personality or whether we're preference or we're conservative or we're liberal, but this is God's plan. This is God's best. There are reasons and answer those questions, but kind of bringing it back rather than just trying to instill our opinions. Our opinions are not what are going to influence, and we may change our opinions down the road. I know there's a lot of things I was opinionated about 20 years ago that have changed now, or I've grown, or I've learned different things. But God's plan, the Word of God, those things are very important. And so having those conversations with our kids, I think. As they get older, also asking questions is another way. One, I would say, influencing, being open, to answer, but then also asking questions. I remember, I just thought of this story, but, we used to get in trouble. Some parents would get upset with us because our kids knew that Santa Claus wasn't real much earlier than a lot of the kids. But the reason is we always said we will never lie to our kids. We'll never mislead them. So, when one day they came and said, Dad, is Santa Claus real? We had
I think his question was, Dad, are you Santa Claus?
Are you Santa Claus?
I see a wind blowing on the nations of the earth, stirring the hearts of men and bringing refreshing. As it continues to blow, it gains momentum and becomes an unstoppable torrent that sets things in order in the earth. The sleeping giant is awakening through the power of the Holy Spirit. A people, the church, activated in the gifts and demonstration of the Spirit. Altars are filled with repentant hearts, longing for a move of God. I see a great awakening has begun.
And I had to say, yes, I was, and so that was but and people got upset. Well, you shouldn't have told them that, but we want to set a precedence. We're never going to lie to our kids. We're never going to mislead them. But I know some parents, their kids are, older and all their friends in school know, but they're still, oh no, Santa Claus is real, and I remember Erica one time when
the Tooth Fairy story.
The Tooth Fairy.
Yeah.
Tell that story. It's hilarious.
Well, we just do it for fun, right? Whenever they lose a tooth, we say, oh, the Tooth Fairy has given you, a $1 coin and all that. So they always get super excited about it. But, Sometimes when you have very bright, brilliant kids, that's the problem. You cannot, you cannot just, think that nothing, they don't see it, they don't hear
have
it or
questions.
anything. They have questions. So one day when I was driving them to school, I remember that one of them had lost a tooth and they got the gold coin. And when I was in the car, my son, right, Ethan, he looked at me and he said, "Mom, tell me the truth. You are the tooth fairy, right?" So at that moment, I didn't know what to answer. I kept quiet for a while. I was debating in my heart. Should I lie to him and keep the game going? And then his two sisters were in the car. Or should I tell them the truth? So I decided to tell them the truth
Yeah,
because
you did the right thing. All right, told them the
because
truth.
once you lie about something, after a while you would have to come back and tell the truth because they would grow up one day, they would know. And I had to put on the weighing scale what is important, to keep the game going or to really be truthful and let my kids know that your parents will never ever lie to you. So I had to tell him. I said, "Yes, you're right. I'm the tooth fairy." And lo and behold, my youngest daughter, and she was so young, right? And Erica just, she has that very innocence, Then she suddenly, after a long pause, she turned to me and said, "Okay, Mom, you're the tooth fairy. So tell me, how do you become so small?"
How do you turn into the little fairy?
I had a good laugh. I was trying not to swerve away from my lane, and her brother and sister were like rolling their eyes and they were laughing. And for many years, we kept, joking about this. But children are innocent, right? And they would believe you because you are their parents.
Yeah.
So I want to come back and talk about this seriously. Where does influence come from? Influence comes from our relationship. So,
And I think trust, because if we hadn't told them the truth and they found out, they wouldn't trust what we said on other things, and we lose that influence.
Right. So when God gave us the children, God gave us the authority and influence on the onset from heaven. So if you leverage on this influence that God has and build a loving, trusting relationship with your children, you will protect them through this relationship and influence. Let me tell you, Derek, on the onset, I have embraced the fact that my children will make mistakes. And they may sometimes make grave mistakes in their life, but I make it on the onset that I will never let them go in my spirit, in my heart. I will always intercede, pray for them, believe the best for them, and know that God is in their life and He and us together will bring them to their destiny.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that that it's building that trust, that influence in that destiny so that they're comfortable sharing. And it's so important that we become that advisor. We become the person that they will go to with questions because they see our wisdom. And, even years later, we were talking to one of our, children. I'm trying not to use names all the time. So, because I know there's people from our church listening and know them, and we don't want them to tell the story. So please, if you're watching, don't embarrass them. But we were talking about some difficult heart issues. And one of the statements that was made is, "Mom, Dad, I know that you guys are people of wisdom and you really have knowledge and wisdom concerning this. So I'm listening." And I thought that really spoke to me, that in the teenage years, they would have that perception, but that didn't happen overnight. Why were we able to speak into issues, even if they didn't agree or totally understand? Because they've seen the wisdom, they've seen the character, they know that we are there, and we take our roles very seriously to be the parent. And so many kids, parents nowadays, I'd say they try to be their kids' friends. And our children have enough friends, but they need parents. And so that's our role, is that we've got to be the parent.
Yeah, sometimes they reverse, like in the beginning, we should be parents because they're still young and immature.
Yeah.
We must be the parent. We must be the leader. We must guide, guard, and govern, right? But we don't do it. So we want to be their friend. But then later part, when we should be their friend,
or they're in trouble and they need us to be the parent,
we become the parent. We want to control them. And that usually happens in their teenage years. So you can see the reverse of the disorder, the chaos. So you need to be a parent. You be the parent. And you be a loving parent, not a perfect, but loving parent, wise parent. But when you But at some point, you need to transit and become an advisor,
Yeah.
become a friend to them, become someone that will be their cheerleader, So that transition, the kids go through transition. The parents also need to go through that transition. And sometimes if you don't transit, that's where the power struggle lies.
Yeah.
So it's either I say, you say, then and that power struggle will actually break the relationship.
Yeah, and I think it's important. It's understanding what causes that transition. It is maturity, and the Bible talks about. We always talk about the word. There's different Greek words for the word son, and the one of the words is the word weos, which means mature son. That those that are led by the Spirit of God are mature sons or mature daughters. And so that allows us to be led, but it speaks of maturity. So when a child is younger, they don't know anything. Do this, don't touch that. It's hot. Listen to mommy, listen to daddy. And there's discipline that's there. As they get older, we speak into them, but as they make mistakes, and we know they're going to make mistakes, they learn from those mistakes. But when they come to the place of maturity, that's where we transition to being the advisor, to where we're still a voice of wisdom, but now as an adult, they learn to process, they've learned logic, they've learned to make the decisions and have to be responsible for their own decisions and not live in a controlled environment. So many parents try to control their kids by the environment, and they never grow, they never mature, or they go off to college and go crazy, or they get out of that controlled environment because, virtue is innocence tested. It's not just having innocence, but they've been able to work out the belief, work out that wisdom, and it becomes a part of them. And that's where we become an advisor. This is what I think, this is what I feel, but you decide. And that's a responsibility. Sometimes I say, well, just tell me what to do. But no, part of maturing is now they decide. And I'm a grown man now. I'm going to be 50 next year, but I still call my dad for advice. I still call my dad because he's got wisdom. But the relationship's different. He's not telling me what to do. He's giving me wisdom, and then I have to make the decision to do that. Right. And so those are the roles of influence.
Yeah, so we mentioned earlier about the first 6 years, we need to lay the ground rules, need to lay the foundation, right, the values. And then the next 7 years, we observe that they perform consistently some of these key values that will set them for success.
Yeah.
By the time they hit 14, that's when you realize that they enter into these teenage years, they are now wanting to challenge the boundaries.
Be more independent, yeah.
They want to be independent. They want to challenge boundaries. They want to also be have the ability to make certain decisions. So we have to allow them progressively to do that. And why we get into trouble is when we don't teach them, and now at this point, they want to make decisions, but the decisions are not wise, detrimental. So parents come into control, and that's where all these problems will start. So you see on the onset, if you are a parent, you have young children or yet to be married, you want to be a parent one day, or you are pregnant, you need to know right now is the time you start learning how to impute and input right values to your children, and how to do it wisely. Because once you do that, it's not that, every parent's life is not smooth. We know that, no matter how good your children are, there will be difficult times. There will be times where they want to rebel, or when they feel that they need to defend themselves. But if the foundation is strong enough, then we have less headaches down the road. And even if, there are times where we make mistakes as parents, we do make mistakes. We have the ability to apologize and say, hey, I'm sorry. That was not the right thing to do. That was not the right thing to say. I apologize, if I've hurt you. And guess what? Our children will learn that, hey, yes, I'm worthy enough for my parents to, acknowledge that. And also my parents are human, but yet they are open. They are willing to admit their mistakes, and they move on. So all these are important learning lessons.
Yeah, the honesty, the truth, being the voice of wisdom. Even as we make mistakes, we can take responsibility for our mistakes. Those are the things that help our children to see that we're a positive influence, and they see God in our lives. Right. So, for those watching online, whatever age group your kids are in, be the parent. Don't just try to be the friend. Be truthful with them, live life in front of them. Don't try to shelter them. There's times we want to protect them, and that's what parents do. But we've got to allow them to ask the questions, to be exposed, to go through life and develop the virtues and be that influence that God wants us to be as a parent. We hope you've been blessed by this series and by this episode. If you have a link, just click the link below and you can begin to share it with somebody. Subscribe to us. We also want to give a big shout out. Thank you to all of our Derek Dunn Ministry partners that are helping us to bring this kind of broadcast and other materials to the body at large, and hope you're blessed. If you're not a partner, go to our website, derekdunn.org, and consider being a partner today. We'll see you next week.